All right, we are back again talking about the 2025 NBA draft with another draft analyst. This time we'll be joined by Stone Hansen to talk about a handful of prospects, a few that he feels that he's higher on than general consensus, and a few that he may be a touch lower on. But we'll dive into some of these prospects, talk about some good fits for them, what they do well, what they could work on, why he's high or low. But it'll just be another opportunity to talk about this draft class. With the NBA draft a week from today, it's exciting times for us dynasty managers. This will be a more draft focused show, not as much on the dynasty side of things. We have more of that on the way, but I still think that it's very important to get a good perspective on who's going to be good. Because you can have a good fantasy stats set and be a player that can block shots, but if we don't think you're good, if you don't end up being that good and enough to get on the court to block those shots, then how valuable do you end up being in fantasy? But it's also arguably our favorite time of the year for dynasty managers. I mean, of course, we love watching playoff basketball. It's the best basketball there is, especially the NBA Finals, which is awesome. I think the amount of days in between games is kind of annoying, but the product has been incredible. But it's really like dynasty managers. We like the off season. We like the draft. We like free agency. We like mock drafts. Let me tell you, I'm excited for mock draft season to see how things shake out. And with this show, doing 5 episodes a week, I'm hoping to do, 1, a lot of mock drafts, but 2, just be able to talk about a lot of different things. It's already been fun so far and excited to continue to do that. But before I bring in Stone to talk about the 2025 draft, just want to remind you guys that BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. With baseball season in full swing, we're also deep into the NBA and NHL finals. And BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news and scores, and even live in-game betting while the games are being played. We have Game 6 of the NBA Finals on Thursday. The lines have changed. The Thunder are now favored by 6.5, and they're up to a minus 1,700 in the series. And that all revolves around Tyrese Halliburton's calf. How healthy will he be? Will he be able to play? I imagine if, as we get closer to this game, more updates come out saying that he, whether he will play or how close to being 100% he is, that will also impact this line. It was 5.5 when we looked at it for yesterday's show. It's now 6.5. So making sure to get in on the action early is a good thing, but you could also, if you want to bet Pacers side, maybe those points go a little bit more in their favor. So maybe it gets up to 7.5 if more updates come out. Not sure entirely, but we'll be keeping an eye on those lines if you're interested in getting on the action for these games. But regardless of whether you bet on it or not, I think that the lines end up being pretty interesting because usually the Vegas lines are pretty accurate. So seeing how teams are favored is always interesting to me. So even if you're not looking to bet, keeping an eye on those things, it's a pretty interesting storyline to follow. We also keep the dog days of summer rolling with the largest selection of odds on everything, with updated odds on the MLB, UFC and boxing, to tennis and NFL futures. BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info. And then in between the games, you can head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and a live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, and we have Stone here with us to talk about the 2025 draft class. We have a few prospects that we have picked out to talk about. You can find him on Twitter at report_court. But before we get into some of these prospects, Stone, 1, how are you? And 2, can you tell me a little bit about the work that you do and how you've kind of enjoyed this draft cycle?
Yeah, thanks for having me. First of all, I'm doing well. I just got back from vacation, but I'm trying to catch up on all the last minute work I have for the final week of the draft. Um, I've enjoyed this cycle. It started off, I think, a little more down on it, but as I've watched more players, I've grown more and more fond of it. And I'm just finishing up my process as we go, and I have a few players left to get to, but for the most part, I'm pretty much wrapping up for this cycle.
Yeah, nice. It's good to get a little vacation, a little calm before the storm, because the next few weeks are going to be incredibly busy for everybody that talks about the draft, and then of course Summer League coming up right after that's going to be a busy few weeks. So glad you were able to get a little bit of a vacation in. But we'll go ahead and get into talking about some of these prospects. I'm going to pull them up on the screen just to have a background there. But the first guy I want to talk about is one of the other top Duke prospects in Kon Knueppel, who I know obviously everybody knows he can shoot, but I think he can do a lot more than that. Can put the ball on the floor pretty well, is a decent playmaker, competes on defense, maybe not as elite in some of these other quarters because the shooting really sticks out. But what's your overall analysis of Knueppel as a prospect?
Yeah, I'm really high on him, and I think it has to do primarily with the shooting, as you elaborated on. I think the level of shooting is near elite. Like there's versatility there. He comes off screens, off movement. The touch is amongst the best I've ever seen, I would say. And I think that intersection between that shooting and the shooting versatility, along with the processing that he has, is the highest level of intersection that I think I've seen. I think he's an extremely quick processor, and something that I think separates a lot of players as processors is the fact that they start looking at what they're going to do before they get the ball rather than wait to get the ball, then determine what they want to do with it. And I think Knueppel is really great at understanding that, and has plans A, B, and C lined up before he even gets the ball passed to him. And it really allows for him to make a lot of quick and easy, decisive decisions that leads, in my opinion, to winning basketballs. So I think that intersection and the ability to weaponize the shooting really makes him a strong offensive weapon.
And on the defensive side of things, I mean, it's not a strength for him. Defense isn't, but I don't think he's just a liability out there. What's your overall evaluation of him on defense? Do you think that is something that either NBA teams are concerned about, or that, in a few years, if he's on a team that's playing in the playoffs, that teams are going to be able to match up hunt him just to kind of take advantage of him? Is that going to be that level of a weakness?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much the technicality or proficiency defensively that he has issues with, or polish or anything like that. It's just the athleticism, right? Like athletically, the foot speed and the lateral mobility, they're always going to be negatives for him. That's just something that I don't think is ever going to be able to be improvable upon to a degree that is not a liability. But having said that, he's extremely strong. Knueppel, he's not the quickest guy, but he's extremely great at taking contact absorption, especially through the chest. And I think that makes him a pretty good point of attack defender against more strength-based creators rather than guys that are relying on their burst and speed. Because in those situations, he will be hunted, I think, and picked apart. But if you could get him in matchups and situations where sometimes he's big enough too, he's like 6'5", and I think there's room for him to guard some wings, guys that are just more reliant upon their strength to gain space advantages rather than their speed and burst. So while there are situations that I think Knueppel will struggle, I do think that there's room for him to actually be a positive defensively against some of those other guys.
And we'll be watching on draft night to see where he actually ends up. But is there any teams in particular that you really like or dislike for him? I think his range is probably, I would say, going to start at 4 and probably doesn't go down too far, but I guess maybe 8 potentially. Crazier things could happen on draft night, but is there a team in particular that you really like the fit for him?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to find a fit that's bad for this kind of guy because every team could use a processor and floor spacer to the degree that Knueppel is. A couple teams in particular, you mentioned 4, but I do actually like the 3rd pick. That's not to spoil too much, but that's where I have him on my own board. I think it makes a lot of sense there. I think if he were to drop further down a little bit, I really like him with the 9th spot. With the Raptors, obviously they need a lot of floor spacing with that team. They have a lot of ball handlers as it is, and having someone that could come in and finish a lot of the plays that those guys soak up the usage and ball handling duties for, I think would really help elevate and unlock a new level for a lot of the guys that handle the ball for them. So those they're probably the furthest ends of the range spectrum that you laid out there, but I think those for me are two spots I'd definitely be looking at.
And like you said, every team can use a player like this. There isn't a bad fit for Conklin as a prospect, and any team would love having a player like him on their team. But it is pretty interesting to see because the wide range of outcomes. I mean, he would immediately slot in, I would assume, as a starter in Charlotte, and then Utah and Washington obviously need to fill a ton of holes. So wherever he ends up, pretty confident that there isn't going to be a bad spot for him. So we have 6 players we're going to talk about today. 3 players that you're a touch higher on, and 3 players that you're a little lower on, and we'll alternate instead of saying all positive at the beginning and then end on a negative note. We'll alternate here, and we'll talk about next Igor Demon from BYU, who is maybe not the most polarizing prospect in this class, but he's up there because there are people that have him as like maybe near a top 5, at least a top 10 player because he's a 6'9" guy that can pass the ball, and then there's other people that are pretty low on him and have him outside the lottery or even into the 20s. I think I have him somewhere in the 20s on my board. Where do you stand on Jaeger Demon as a prospect?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the lower end with him, and I acknowledge that he's a great passer. I don't think he's elite too in the way that some people try to frame it. Like I do think he's a really good passer, but there's still some accuracy concerns there. I don't think he's the most accurate passer that I've seen, and I don't think he's got great velocity on like all of his passes. There's still a little bit to work there. He's not coming in as an elite passer, but there's pathways to getting there for him. But my biggest issue with Demeen that I think makes me a lot lower on him is in order to be this point guard that I think he's being sold as, at least for the people that are higher on him. I think you just need to be able to handle much better than he does, and I don't think he's a great ball handler. And to be honest, like it's to the point that I don't think being a guard is really in a range of outcome for Demeen. I think he's more of a wing actually, because I don't think he can handle ball pressure when it comes at him at the point of attack, even against smaller guards. Despite his size, like he's not really using his frame to back down a lot of guys, or really he lacks a lot of strength currently too. That's something that's improvable, but he's not coming into the league with. And I don't think he has a lot of counters within his handle to be able to get past the point of attack or the help defense when that comes. And I think that really puts a cap and a limitation on how accessible the passing can be when you're not able to create downhill separation. So for the intrigue and mystique that comes with being 6'9" as a ball handler, without the ball handling, I think a lot of that starts to go away. And I think he could still be a useful player as a wing. Like I don't think that I'm totally giving up on Demeen. Like he's still got great size, and I think I'm not totally giving up on the shot. That's another big question mark for him. And defensively, I think there's room for him to be useful on the wing. He does have a good motor on that end of the court. So there's things there to work with, but I think coming into the league, whatever team were to take him, if you're trying to extrapolate guard value out of him, I personally believe you're setting Demeen up for failure. Like I don't think that that's just a role that is capable of being filled by him. But I think if you're trying to put him more of in a wing type situation, there's room for value to be extrapolated out of him.
Yeah, it's interesting that I guess your take would be that he'd be better as a forward or just like a wing as opposed to a lead ball handler. And I haven't had anyone on this show that's been like a big fan of his to the point where they're making a really strong case. But a lot of the negatives I've heard are like that he can't necessarily like he's a good passer, but he can't create too much for himself in the half court. He's not a great shooter, but he has to shoot a lot of threes because he's not able to get to the rim. And then he's also like, he is tall and he's got a decent wingspan, not a super positive in comparison to his height, but he's also pretty skinny. He's not super strong. What's, I guess, for him to surprise you and be much better as a rookie than maybe you're expecting him to be, what's one thing that you would want to see him do better? Would it be for him to just be able to create his own shot or get to the rim better? Would it be able to, a shooting improvement, a defensive improvement? What would really surprise you year one?
Well, I mean, any of those things at this point would surprise me, but something that I think is more realistic for him, that would be surprising, but would add a value for him would probably be either strong defense or better finishing. Like I think both of those things are still attainable for him, where I don't believe the ball handling really is, and I think that if he were to become a pretty solid finisher with more added strength. More versatility as a finisher. Like I think a lot of the time he kind of just goes for layups versus in-air adjustments or anything of that nature. I think that could, unlock some more things for him where he could be utilized better off ball and have more versatility in that sort of role. Where I don't feel comfortable projecting that it would have to really be outlier development for the ball handling to become a strength of his. I think it's so far behind currently that it's really difficult to project that as something that he can work with at an NBA level to become a lead guard. And currently it's there's room for, like I said, to extrapolate value out of him, but I think that uh, it makes me a lot lower if you're coming into the league projected as a lead ball handler that struggles to handle the ball, finish, and shoot. Those are all things that you kind of need at least one or two of those things to really be a lead initiator. And I don't think Demina is coming into the league with any of those. So it leads to having to project. And I think, as a finisher and a defender, those are things that I can project to maybe get to an adequate level. But um, there's, I think, too many questions there for me to feel comfortable having him anywhere near the lottery.
And I'll probably ask you this for every single player about fit, about a specific team. I know his range of outcomes it's pretty wide at this point, and it really depends on who you ask. Because, like I said at the beginning, some people have him top 10, some people have him outside the top 20. But just for the sake, maybe somewhere inside, just outside the lottery, maybe late lottery, is there a specific team that you think would be a really good fit that would be able to maximize him year one based on your evaluation of him?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Trailblazers are sort of an interesting fit for him. They have guards already that can, take a lot of usage and handle the ball. They have the defensive infrastructure to sort of insulate him on the perimeter with Kamara, and then obviously interior wise, you have the plethora of bigs that they do with Klingon and Robert Williams and Aiden to an extent. So. I think they have an interesting build for Jaeger to possibly achieve those more wing and forward type higher end outcomes that I envision more for Demine. That would make sense for him. And another team that I could throw out there would be maybe a little bit further down would be maybe like the Wizards with their 18th pick. They have a bit more ball handling too. They obviously have Sar that they just drafted at the rim. So I'm looking more at teams like that have a bit of the things that Jaeger already lacks that they're not relying upon him to develop into with a high pick.
Yeah, and if it ends up being a team like Washington, they obviously showed a commitment last season to just playing all their young guys. So he would get the opportunity to work through mistakes, work on the things that we think could be weaknesses or will be weaknesses when he enters the NBA. So it'll probably be pretty rough early on, but it'll give him an opportunity to work through those things. We're going to go back to the positive side of things and talk about a player that's been one of my favorite in the class. So I'm really glad that you like him as well. And that's Drake Powell from North Carolina, who didn't get the opportunity to do a ton while he was there, especially offensively. But there's so much to like. 6'5" with a 7-foot wingspan and a 43-inch vertical that defends and can shoot the ball. Like, frankly, I'm not sure why people aren't even higher on him than I guess consensus is. But I guess with the production at UNC, there's a fair amount of questions. But what's your overall evaluation of him?
Yeah, I really like Powell. I think that there's a lot of defensive intrigue there with me. I think that he is somebody that, at his highest end outcomes, I'm not saying this is the most likely, but there's room for him to be like an all defensive caliber type guy on the perimeter. Offensively, that's where the questions come in because of the really poor fit, I think, at UNC. I think it's fair to say that. But if you watch some of his high school stuff and AAU stuff, which I think is situational, but in certain circumstances such as this, it's maybe better to rely upon it a bit more. He was more comfortable as a ball handler. The shooting has always been, at least adequate, and it was this year as well. So I think there's stuff there offensively, like attacking closeouts. He gets really good shin angles. He's really explosive all around the rim as a finisher. There's things there that I think he can build upon that he wasn't able to show at UNC. And if you pair that, with really great defense, that the instincts, that his reactivity with his hands, I think are really good. It allows him to be, a two-way swing on a player that, in this class in particular, I'm comfortable taking top 20. So I like him quite a bit, and I think that this is a player that is getting slept on quite a bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think the athletic projections are intriguing after the combine because they, like, again, as I said, 7-foot wingspan, 43-inch vertical. Those are both phenomenal numbers, and I think the defense will be there. What's a kind of, I guess, the range of outcomes for him offensively, and do you think that could be or end up being an issue for him? Like, is there enough for him to just be kind of at least like a floor spacer on offense and just be able to kind of play a role, or do you think there is more upside for him to even be like some sort of like shot creator, like the highest end outcome for him to be that level of score? Or do you think basically it's just going to be he's there to play defense and hopefully he's able to contribute enough offensively that it's not a liability?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of those outcomes exist for Powell. I think there's areas where maybe the shot just doesn't come around to an adequate level, and he just really isn't enough of a ball handler to be someone that can attack closeouts to a strong degree. And then you're left hoping that he's able to fulfill the specialist role defensively to a high enough level to earn himself minutes on the court. But I do think I lean more towards the positive end, where I think the shooting has always looked intriguing to me. Like, he flares his elbow out quite a bit. Mechanically, there's a little tweaks, but it's nothing major. The touch is fine. I don't think it's great, but I don't think it's any sort of liability at this point. I think the ball handling looked better in high school than he showed at UNC, and I think even at UNC, I actually kind of liked it. It's not complex in any real way. It's more of something that he's going to be attacking closeouts just because he's so much more athletic. He's strong. He still has a lot of room to put on weight and muscle with his frame, but at his age, he already has sort of the frame to do that. And I think the shin angles that he gets really low to the ground driving, so he's able to get towards the rim really quickly because he's also got great stride length. So I think there's a lot there with the closeout attacking, with the explosiveness around the rim. He's sort of a versatile finisher that I think will be able to draw contact down the road, and up the free throw rate. So I think there's a lot of things there that intrigue me offensively, where you're not relying upon any one trait to translate for him to have success on that end of the court. And I think that's important when you're talking about a guy who's hanging his hat on the defensive side of the ball.
And as far as fits, I know you said that he's a guy, you said, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you said like top 20, you'd be comfortable taking him, but I know there's a lot of mocks that have him second round or even into like the middle of the second round. Any teams in particular? Because I look at, it could be some of those like last teams of the first round, Boston, Phoenix, or the Clippers. Like, he'd be able to step in and play, maybe not a huge role, but a fairly limited role and contribute from day one. But there's also teams like Brooklyn has 2 picks around there. Utah picks at 21. Brooklyn also picks again at 19, just going up the board, where maybe he would play a larger role on more of a rebuilding team. But is there any team in particular that you really like the fit, regardless of it, whether it's he's able to contribute from day one or his long-term development?
Yeah, I mean, if the Nets were to keep a lot of their picks that they have, like, I really like that because I view them currently as kind of a blank canvas. You're starting from scratch. I don't really know how an integral part of the future Claxton or Cam Thomas are for them. I don't really view them as either one of them as that. So I think taking swings on guys that are pretty high upside, like someone like Drake Powell, would really benefit a team like that that's starting over. The Suns, I think, make a lot of sense. I don't really know the direction they're headed, once this KD trade inevitably happens, but they are a team that's perpetually in need of, wing defenders, and I think Powell can fill that role as well. So there's a couple teams down there that I think make sense for Powell, and I'd be pretty intrigued to see what the role would be for him in his rookie year.
And moving on to another wing who's projected to go a little bit earlier, but that you're not quite as high on. And this is a player that I'm not exactly sure what to make of him, because I see it's Tre Johnson, spoiler alert. He seems to be, and like everything I get is like he's a high level scorer. He can score with the ball in his hands. He can move off ball to get open shots, high level shooter. But I'm not convinced about basically anything else about his game. And then I don't know why this. I was telling my friend this the other night. Like there's like a clip. I forgot who they were playing. It was like a late game situation. He's just sitting there like jumping up and down, screaming for the ball. And this is like, I don't know, probably like something that would be like not like a fair evaluation of him overall as a player, but it's like one of those like small moments where like you would say like a coach would see like a player throw his water cup and miss the trash can and not go pick it up versus go pick it, like something that's like really dumb, but like I just can't get the play out of my head. And I'm like, how does he fit in on an NBA team? How does he fit in as a chemistry guy? And this is with me knowing nothing about him personally, so it's probably not a fair evaluation at all. But all that to be said, how do you evaluate Tre Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. Like I've seen clips too where the body language isn't great, but it's difficult for me to really expand on that, not knowing him personally. So I don't try to take too much out of that into my evaluation, because I don't know the player. I feel like you have to be around them to really get a sense of what's going through their head, and I don't have that access, unfortunately. But as far as the on the court issues, I'm more concerned than I think pretty much everyone about the athleticism with him. And I think that's really the big issue for me, where he's got a lot of outcomes where he's a great shooter. He's a knockdown, versatile shooter, can come off of screens, do a lot of the things that I said Knipple does. But I think the big issue for me is that he isn't the processor that Knipple is. And I think that's really the big separator for me. And athletically, he's not someone that creates advantages without that processing. Like, I don't think he's creating a whole lot of space to get downhill. I don't think he's got a lot of vertical athleticism, but I don't think he's laterally that great. I don't think he's got a lot of foot speed. The passing is an issue for some, and I think it looks really good, but typically the process is just when he can't find a way to score, it's a lot of bailout passes. And, he to his credit, there's a lot of times where he makes it look really good. And, I'm not going to take that away from him by any means, but I think that there's not as much creation ability as a lot of people seem to think. Defensively, I'm really worried. I think defensively, there's a lot that it just prevents me from ever thinking he's even going to be a neutral at the NBA level. I think, like I mentioned laterally, I don't think he's great. I think he takes a lot of unnecessary gambles and swipes at balls that he just has no business going for, that he's not going to get. I think there's a lot of awareness lapses off the ball. So defensively, I'm pretty out on it. And if you're really a shooting specialist, even as a finisher, like I don't think he's very good at taking contact. And I don't think he has the frame to put on a whole lot of muscle and strength. He doesn't have like super broad shoulders. The hips aren't very wide. There's things there that make me question whether there's a whole lot of strength to be had despite the super young age. So I view him a lot more as a specialist, as a shooter, rather than this all-around scorer that I think a lot of people do. And I think that really has me a lot lower than most people.
Yeah, that's entirely fair. And I think a lot of those same questions are the ones I have as far as like the passing. Like if you watch a lot of his assists, like it's not like it is just a lot of bailout stuff. So that is a good way of putting it. What do you see like as someone that doesn't necessarily believe in him defensively, or as a creator, or even as a creator for others, as well as a shot creator for himself? What do you view as the higher end outcome for a player like this? Do you still think that he has the same upside that other people may, or do you think like the highest end outcome for him is still lower than, I guess, the high level score that a lot of people expect him to be?
Yeah, I think for me, definitely the latter, where I view him as the highest end outcome as being like just a nuclear shooter, right? Someone that can. I'm not big into comps because situations are different for every player and everything,
Hmm.
but maybe like offensively speaking, filling a Klay Thompson type role, someone that's an extreme style shooter and can be that level of guy that's putting up that level of volume as a shooter. Um, but defensively, there's just a massive gap there that makes me think he can get to any sort of all-star level personally. Um, so I that's what I view him as, and and that again is the higher end outcome. Like if he doesn't hit that threshold, which is a super high bar to reach as a shooter, that's not a given that he's going to be that. Um, if he falls short of that, I think a lot of those sort of specialist shooter players are just not as valuable. And they're fine eighth, ninth men, but when you're talking about starting caliber type guys, it becomes a little bit more difficult to fill them in there without the proper context and situation. So I'm definitely a bit lower on Tre Johnson. He's not someone I would really look at in the lottery, but I know a lot of people, probably everybody, would disagree with me on that. So the onus is on me, to figure out what I'm missing because I'm the odd man out here.
Well, respect to you for still standing on it. But just under the assumption that he is going to be a lottery pick, even if you don't think he should be, is there any teams in particular, uh, at any point in the lottery, you won't even just restrict it to maybe like top 8 or wherever where most people are expecting him to go. Any team in particular where you think that he would fit really well, that he would be maximized?
Yeah, it's difficult to say right now with this particular team with the Pelicans, right? Like there's a lot of things in flux there, but assuming they would keep their wings with Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, like I kind of like that pairing. I could talk myself into it a little bit when you have potentially two nuclear shooters with Trey Murphy and Tre Johnson there, and then Herb to shore up the defense. And obviously Murphy's a great defender in his own right. So I like that perimeter pairing. With Trey doing a lot of uh, shooting development. I would also say kind of similar with Knipple here. The Raptors, I think, make a lot of sense as someone that has a lot of creators around him that would be able to maximize him to as a shooter and as a scorer, but also he'd be insulated defensively on the perimeter, especially with a lot of length around him and guys that could cover up for him. So those would probably be the two fits in the top 10 that I'd be pretty interested in. But there's, I think, probably even a greater chance that he's going top 5 or so in the lottery.
Yeah. All right, we got two more guys to talk about. We're going to move on to a big man, if I can find him to talk about. It's Maxime Raynaud from Stanford. One of the better offensive bigs, I think, in this class, if not the best offensive big in this class. And there's a lot to like on that end. What's your evaluation on him as a prospect?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I'm very in on Reno, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that uh, I think he's just extremely skilled offensively. This is a player that operated a lot for Stanford as the hub of their offense. He's the one directing everything. There'd be some sequences offensively, some possessions where he's used as a dribble handoff guy like 4 or 5 times in the same sequence, and they're using him, and he's rolling. He's roaming out to the perimeter. He's cutting back in for a V cut, back out to the perimeter. Like there's a lot of different things that he can do, and I think that really intrigues me. He's obviously a bit older, but as an older player, uh, he meets the thresholds and the qualifications of already being coming into the league good, not needing a whole lot of polish and development, at least offensively speaking, for the age curve that he's on. I think he's a real stretch five. I believe the shot is real, and I think that that gets thrown out too much for a lot of centers. Like, oh, maybe he'll be able to stretch it one day, and a lot of times it's more theoretical and doesn't really come to fruition. But I think right now is coming into the league as a guy who's already a stretch five, and I think that leads to a lot of value. I think he's a really good passer, especially stationary wise, but also on the move. There's clips of him like dribbling into the defense and doing behind the backs, over the shoulders. Really intriguing stuff that not a lot of guys just have. I think you hit the nail on the head saying he's probably the best offensive center prospect in this class, and I think a lot of value is tied to that. Like I wouldn't put limitations offensively speaking where he's you know all-star caliber offensive player. That's in the range of outcomes. I'm not saying he's coming into the league as that, but I think there's a chance that that may happen down the road. So I'm pretty in on him. Defensively speaking, there's more work there, but I actually think the rim protection is pretty interesting. I think he can turn and directionally change in the air as a rim protector. He's not a one effort guy. Like I think he has a second jump to be able to challenge shots. He's not super strong, especially in the lower body. So I think defending post up is going to be difficult for him. I do think that there's some opportunity as a four there, just because the weak side rim protection, he's good at tracking the ball while he's away from the ball to be able to provide value in that area. So even though defensively it's a little bit more of a challenge, I think, to fit him because of the lack of strength, I do think that there's opportunity for him to actually be a positive on that end as well.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, maybe that's not what most people are expecting, but like good to hear that there is the potential for that to happen. The offense is, I think, what's going to be most attractive to teams. Like you mentioned, him being a little bit of an older prospect, but 7-foot offensive hubs have been coveted in the modern NBA. There's been, I mean, OKC has Isaiah Hartenstein is a guy that can do that. Obviously, Nikola Jokic is there, Alperen Sengun, Domantas Sabonis. How early could you see him going? Because I mean, I've seen rankings have him as an early to mid second round. I've seen some people have him as high as a borderline lottery player. Where kind of would you imagine a player of this talent going? Maybe not just necessarily to a specific team, but if you want to mention a team that you really like there, we can just kind of cram those two questions into one.
Yeah, I don't really know where the league sits with him. It seems like he is, like you mentioned, sort of all over the place. I'm probably the highest on him that I've seen. Like I have him top 10. I'm really in on him. But in terms of where the league sits, like I could see him going in the back end of the lottery. I could see him dropping into the early second round. Like I think that range of outcome is all within possibility on draft night for him. In terms of the best fits, like I think this is the kind of player that I think fits on a lot of teams because of the offensive skill that he has. Like I think he can be a 4 or a 5 for a lot of teams. You probably want someone that's the primary rim protector just because he's not strong enough to defend post-ups quite yet. And I'm not really sure he ever will, to be quite honest. Like he's coming into the league older with a lack of strength, and it's the less likely that he puts on that muscle the older you get. But a team like the Miami Heat at 20 would really intrigue me, right? If you pair him alongside Bam, I think you have two really skilled passers interior-wise, and it allows Raynaud to stretch the floor while Bam can operate more so in the interior than he's had to do the last couple of years where he's being pushed out to the perimeter a little bit more. And I think it allows both of them to focus more on their strengths. And that pairing would really intrigue me. You also have Ware there, obviously, and you could do a bit of a trio thing with them. So that's a team I would really like for him. But to be honest, there's a lot of teams I think that make sense for him.
Yeah, I'm a Hawks fan. I'm really hoping he's one of the guys that I would love for them to take at 22 to be a backup center to Onyeka Okongwu and what could be like a 30-18 or 28-20 minute split. I don't want to just stick Okongwu in another minute split, but I think right now it's like talented enough that it would be enjoyable. And seeing him as an offensive hub, I think opens up a lot of things for a team that's really struggled offensively when Trae Young hasn't been on the floor. Now they have Jalen Johnson back healthy, so hopefully that'll offset some of the things. But I like that fit as well. The last player that we're going to talk about today is, let me pull that back up. Oh, Liam McNeely from UConn, who former 5-star, but didn't have a good season at UConn and has slid down boards. And I haven't seen too many people that are Liam McNeely truthers or just super high on him. What's your evaluation of him as a prospect?
Yeah, I think a lot of the same parallels, to be honest, with Tre Johnson, but just expanded on more. I think the athleticism is actually meaningfully worse than Tre Johnson, who I already have athletic concerns about. I think McNeely really struggles to uh, get any sort of explosion out as a finisher or off of the dribble. Uh, I mean, it was an extremely poor context and fit at UConn here. They sort of forced him into this pseudo lead ball handler, which has just never been a part of McNeely's game. And I do think it was good to show that to evaluators this is just not something he's really capable of being and filling at the NBA level, and that's not a knock on him. That's just not really his game. And I think at Mount Verde, he was more of an off-ball specialist, and that's what he did. And again, in poor context, I like to look more into priors and see how they fill different roles. As an off-ball guy, when you obviously had Flag and Queen there, and there was, I think, a lot of understanding of where to be on the court as a floor spacer. But I really question the finishing. I don't think that it's really going to translate to an NBA level. I don't think that the defense is particularly good. He's someone that I think is going to get picked on and hunted at the NBA level because the athleticism is not only is the foot speed and lateral mobility poor, and like we talked about with Knuppel, but I think that the strength is really lacking. And I think when you're missing sort of all of those components, it really makes it difficult for you to be any sort of neutral or positive on the defensive end. I don't think the awareness is great. There's times where he's making the right rotations, they're crisp, but there's other times where I think he's slow to get where he wants to be, even though he recognizes it. And it makes it difficult for him to really impact the game on that side of the court. I think the processing as a passer, we saw at UConn this year, it's just not really there. I think maybe in more of a connector role it can be, but we haven't really seen that even going back to Montverde. I don't think he was a great connective passer. So I'm pretty out on McNeely just because I think he is a specialist, and I think he doesn't have the sort of shooting gravity and really even the bailout passes that Tre Johnson has. Like, I don't think McNeely has that within his game. So these sort of shooting specialists just have to reach a higher threshold and have a lot of these micro skills that get him to that point. And currently, I haven't really seen that out of McNeely. So I'm a bit lower on him than where a lot of people have him, I think.
So what would you say would be kind of the range of outcomes for a player like him? Like, you think that the floor, like bare minimum, he would be, I don't even want to say like a rotation shooter, but like a reserve shooter that doesn't really contribute much else, but can hit threes, get hot, maybe make an impact that way. And the higher end outcome for him, like, do you see him potentially, if a couple of things break his way or he develops in ways that maybe you're not expecting him to, maybe this guy is a starter? Or would you say the highest outcome is that he's still just a reserve or rotation shooter?
Yeah. I mean, I think that for me is sort of the higher end outcome is he's this just sort of rotation specialty shooter that is able to hopefully come off of screens. He's not really athletic enough to consistently be running around all the way and make defenders chase him, but I think there's movement equity with him. I do think he is someone that despite the shooting numbers this season at UConn, is much better shooter than he showed there. I actually do buy the shooting quite a bit, regardless of what the UConn numbers say. But I don't think that he's as versatile as Tre Johnson as a shooter. Like, I don't think he's got quite the movement equity and the full speed deceleration stuff that Tre Johnson does. I think that the worst end outcomes, like I think he's just probably not an NBA player at the lower end outcomes. Like, I think that there's worlds where he's not able to get the shooting to the level it needs to be to compensate for the fact that he's missing all these other elements. And it leads to him, playing overseas or something, which I don't want to say, it's just not NBA worthy, but you still are a good player if you're able to play professionally. It's just, I think that both the floor and the ceiling are lower, and from my perspective, than I think where consensus has them.
All right, that was 6 players we were able to talk about in about 45 minutes. So Stone, thank you so much for hopping on with me to be able to talk about these guys. Where can we find your work? Where can we follow you? Can you just drop all your content and links and stuff?
Yeah, thank you for having me. You can follow me and all my work at report_court on Twitter. I'm also at Blue Sky. If you search Stone Hansen, there's, I think, only one of me. And then I do all my work with Upside Swings, which is a draft-centric show. We're obviously in the thick of the draft, so we're cranking out a lot of content right now. So if you're interested in any of that, you can follow us on any of the socials. We're on YouTube now as well. So go ahead and give us a like or a review if you're into really in-depth stuff. Sometimes we have episodes that go up to like 3 hours long talking about guys. So if you're really into the minutia of it all and you want to learn more about the draft, hopefully we can be a good resource for you. But thank you again for having me, and it was a lot of fun to talk about these guys.
Yeah, thanks for again hopping on. It was a ton of fun. Make sure you follow Stone at report_court, and then check out the Upside Swings podcast. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball Podcast. And I'll see you guys next time.